No one in Ashgrove General's knew that Reyna Cross used to decide, in the field, who got treated first. When there wasn't enough of anything for everyone. By the end of the week, the man she'd already saved once would be the one to tell them why that never really left her. Cross. Paula Grant's voice carried a pitch built to reach the whole nurse's station without her ever needing to raise it. You want to explain why the Okoye family is standing right there, asking why nobody's cried with them yet? They asked when the biopsy results would be back. I told them 20 minutes. Reyna didn't look up from the chart. You know what I mean. 14 words and a pat on the shoulder. People notice when a nurse doesn't feel anything, Reyna. Families remember that kind of nurse. Understood. Reyna closed the chart and moved down the hall. Because arguing with Paula Grant in front of the desk cost more than it bought. And there was a stretcher waiting in Bay 4. 4 years at Ashgrove, and Reyna had never once raised her voice on this floor. She'd built her whole second life around not raising it. Around walking into a room, doing what it needed, and leaving before anyone had time to ask her something that wasn't about the patient. It was, she privately thought, the only kind of quiet that had ever actually held. She stepped into Bay 4 and, before she'd registered doing it, took the side of the bed that faced the door. She did that in every room, every time, without deciding to. Some old part of her that had never fully come home still needed to know where the exit was before it let the rest of her focus on anything else. Bay 4 held a 19-year-old with a dislocated shoulder from a skateboarding fall, more embarrassed than hurt. Reyna had the resident in, positioned, and out again inside a minute. Traction set before he'd finished asking where to stand. The whole reduction over almost before the kid registered it had started. In the locker room before the shift, she'd tucked a thin chain further under her scrub collar without quite deciding to. Old habit doing it for her. The same as most things about herself she'd stopped examining too closely. A metal instrument tray hit the floor 2 bays down, a tech, fumbling a restock. And the clatter rang off the tile in one short, flat burst. Reyna's hand stilled on the chart for 1 full second before it kept moving. It sounded, if you'd spent 2 tours around a very different kind of impact. Almost like fragment landing on a metal floor a few feet away. Close enough to flinch it, too far to matter yet. She finished charting the reduction and didn't let her hand hesitate a second time. You had that kid calmed down before Dr. Osei even got his gloves on, said Theo, the newest tech on the floor. Hovering at her elbow with the particular nervous energy of someone still being evaluated. Marcus took 10 minutes talking a patient down last week and the guy still screamed the whole time. Different tone of voice. Panic feeds on panic. You just don't feed it back. Reyna kept her voice even. You never explain anything like it's a big deal. Even when it obviously is. Theo nodded at her collar. What's the chain? You always tuck it in like that's a whole routine. It is. Old habit, nothing worth a story before coffee. Reyna let the subject close itself and didn't slow down. Grant caught her 20 minutes later. This time over a discharge Reyna had delayed by 15 minutes to recheck a wound drain trend that looked fine to everyone else. We move patients, Cross. We don't hold beds because a number twitched. It didn't twitch. It trended. It was within range. I looked. Grant hadn't looked. Reyna knew she hadn't. The same quiet way she'd learned most things about Paula Grant over 4 years of watching her from 3 feet away and saying nothing. Understood. Reyna said again, and went back to her rounds. There was a particular safety in being the nurse the whole floor overlooked, and she'd spent 4 careful years building it. Grant was pushing hard for something that week. Reyna had heard it from 3 different people in 3 different tones, and every version agreed on the shape of it. Ashgrove's was up for a regional compassionate care recognition. The kind that came with 2 new nurse positions attached and a line in the budget Grant had been chasing for 3 years running. She intended to deliver a unit that looked like the name on Friday. When someone with a badge and a checklist finally came to see it in person. An all-staff email went out near the end of the shift. Subject line. Compassionate Care Spotlight. This Friday, forwarded twice before Reyna even opened it. A local news crew, it said. A feel-good piece on the department. Everyone should be prepared to represent the unit at its best. Reyna read it once, deleted the forward, and didn't think about it again. Until the radio at the desk crackled with an incoming call. Unresponsive adult male, found down near the transit shelter on 5th, confused and combative on scene. Possible psychiatric hold, ETA 12 minutes. Someone down the hall muttered, "Here we go," like they already knew the shift they were about to have. Reyna didn't know why the sound of it made her flinch half a second longer than the tray had. She filed it away, the same place she filed everything that wasn't technically her business yet. And went to find out what was coming through the doors. Vanessa Cray found Grant at the nurse's station, blazer sharp, phone in hand like a second badge. "Tell me the incoming isn't who I think it is." "Depends who you think it is." Somewhere out past the ambulance bay, a siren rose out of the traffic noise. And didn't fade the way sirens usually did when they were headed somewhere else. 5th Street. Combative male. "I've had 3 people forward me the same clip since Tuesday." A man screaming at the VA office, throwing a chair. "That's the same call, isn't it?" "Probably." The radio at the desk crackled once, 2 minutes out. And a tech near the doors straightened up without being told to. Red and blue light was already sweeping across the glass at the end of the hall. 2 minutes had turned out to be generous. "Then he cannot be anywhere near a camera Friday," Cray said, "fast now," raising her voice slightly over the commotion building at the doors. "Not in a hallway one could catch through a door. Not on this floor at all, if we can manage it. I sold this segment as a warm, well-run department. He's a patient, Vanessa. Not a location problem. He's both, this week." Cray called it over her shoulder, already stepping back out of the way as the doors banged open. The VP title she'd been chasing for 2 years riding on this Friday going off without a hitch, and every ounce of that showing on her face. The doors opened on the call mid-sentence. A man in his 40s, jacket too thin for the cold, wrists loosely restrained on EMS's insistence. Shouting words that dissolved into other words before they connected to anything, the gurney already halfway into the bay before Cray had finished stepping clear. His eyes tracked the room too fast, landing nowhere. And his skin under the fluorescent light carried a gray undertone that had nothing to do with the weather outside. "Combative on scene, resisted transport twice," the medic said, already talking over Cray, handing off without waiting for her to finish moving. "No ID on him, no known history. Vitals are rough, temps up, heart rate's up, pressure's soft. PD's already got a note on file from a disturbance call earlier this week. Get him restrained and sedated before he hurts someone," Grant said, already moving toward the med cart. "Psych can sort out the rest once he's calm." Dr. Osei arrived at the bedside a beat behind her, chart already open. "Let's hear the vitals again before anyone reaches for anything." "His temp's 102.6, Reyna said. "And a psych hold doesn't usually look like this. Look at his hands. He's not posturing, he's shaking. Those aren't the same thing. He assaulted a table with a folding chair 3 days ago," Grant said. "I think we can afford to assume the obvious." "I'd rather not assume with a fever this high on an unknown patient," Osei said, and looked at Reyna. "What do you want?" "A full set of labs before anything sedating goes near that line. Lactate, CBC, blood cultures. We don't have time to run a full workup on every difficult patient who gets carried through that door," Grant said. "He's not difficult. He's sick," Reyna said. "Those aren't the same word, and using the wrong one is how people end up restrained instead of treated." "Labs first," Osei said, already writing the order. "Hold the sedative until I say otherwise." Grant's jaw tightened. "You've got 15 minutes before I call it a psych transfer regardless. Use them." Reyna got closer to the bed than anyone else had been willing to. Up close, under the shouting, she could see it clearly. The fixed stare that wasn't quite focused, a tremor running too fine and too fast to be simple fear, his shirt clinging to him with sweat despite the cold he'd come in from. He flinched hard when a call bell rang 2 bays over. And for half a second, before the confusion swallowed it again, Something in his face looked less like panic and more like listening. The specific stillness of a man checking a sound against a memory instead of just reacting to noise. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" Reyna kept her voice low and flat, the register she used on herself when nothing else in a room was under control. He didn't answer in words. He turned his head toward her voice instead of away from it. Which was, on its own, information the rest of the room seemed too busy to register. "Dr. Osei already put a hold on the sedative," Reyna told the tech quietly. "I want that lactate and septic panel drawn now, not after Grant asks twice. She's not going to like the wait. She doesn't have to. It's not her order to change." A tech cutting away his jacket for the exam pulled out a worn set of dog tags from the inside pocket. The chain gone thin and soft with age, and set them on the tray without a second glance. Reyna looked at them a beat longer than the moment required, then made herself look away and keep working. An older security guard named Frank leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the bed with an attention that had nothing to do with keeping order. "He's not squaring up to hit anybody," he said, to no one Reyna could identify. "Man's bracing for something that already happened. Seen that look plenty of times, myself included." Theo caught her by the supply cart a few minutes later, still wide-eyed. "You basically told Grant no. In front of Cray. I told her to wait 15 minutes. There's a difference. Does it feel different?" Reyna didn't answer that one. Down the hall, Cray was on the phone again, low and urgent. And Grant stood watching the bed through the glass with the particular stillness of a woman doing math she didn't like the answer to. The labs came back while Reyna was still at the bedside, white count climbing hard, lactate elevated, a source not yet named. Not psychiatric, not remotely psychiatric, something in him was actively drowning. And the shaking, the shouting, the eyes that wouldn't track. All of it was his brain running out of the one thing it needed most to keep working right. "Septic encephalopathy," Reyna said, when Grant finally came to see the numbers herself. "Infection bad enough to shut down how the brain works before the rest of the body even finishes catching up to how sick it already is. It doesn't look like a fever spiking. It looks like losing your mind. That's the whole danger of it." The monitor's pulse tone ticked up a notch, sharper, faster. Neither of them looked at it. Both of them heard it. "Everyone reads it as psychiatric," Reyna said, "right up until it kills someone the same night. Then we treat the infection. We need an antibiotic and a bed upstairs, Reyna, not a theory. We need a source first. No one's found where this is coming from. And an antibiotic picked blind is a guess with his life riding on it." A nursing student near the med cart had gone very quiet, watching the numbers climb on the monitor. The stillness of someone realizing, for the first time in her training, that a patient could actually die in the next 20 minutes if nobody moved fast enough. Grant didn't look at her. Reyna did, once, just long enough to see that she was still watching, and went back to work. He'd stopped answering questions, and started answering something only he could hear. His voice dropping out of English into fragments that weren't words at all. Numbers, maybe, or letters, repeated in a cadence too even to be random. His temperature climbed another half degree in the time it took Reyna to notice it. His blood pressure, soft to begin with, started sliding. "He's decompensating," Reyna said. "I need eyes on his legs, his back. Anywhere he might be hiding a wound he hasn't let anyone near in a long time. He's septic and combative, we don't have time to strip search him for a splinter." He thrashed once, hard, against the restraint the tech hadn't finished loosening. And the alarm on the monitor gave one short, flat beep before the tech silenced it. "It's not a splinter," Reyna said, already cutting at the seam of his pant leg herself. "Veterans self-treat wounds they don't trust a system to look at properly, sometimes for years. And this is what it looks like when that finally catches up to someone. They found it on his left thigh when they got his pant leg up. A wound half healed and half not, scarred crooked around something still buried under the skin. The tissue around it hot and tight in a way the room hadn't thought to look for a few minutes earlier. A fragment, old, never removed. walled off by scar tissue for years until the cold, or the stress, or sheer time finally let the infection through. Whatever had put it there had happened long before tonight, long before this floor. In a place none of the charts in front of them would ever mention. And none of them would ever be able to ask him about directly either. Not without hearing it the way he'd have to tell it, which was its own kind of cost. That's the source, Reyna said. That's been the source the whole time. The monitor's rhythm climbed toward a number the room had been trying not to say out loud. Grant's hand moved toward the restraint kit on reflex. The same reflex that had made sense 15 minutes ago. And would now only cost time there wasn't any left to spend. Don't, Reyna said, and for the first time all week it wasn't a request. If you strap him down right now, his heart rate goes higher, not lower. You'll push him further into this, not out of it. He is still combative, Reyna. He's still scared. Give me 30 seconds to prove it instead of arguing about it. She positioned herself where he could see her without turning his head, low, steady, hands visible and still. Sir, look at me. You're safe. You're in a hospital. Nobody here is going to hurt you. Her voice didn't rise. It found the same flat, unhurried register she used on herself, and held there. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, not aiming for anything. Just reaching for the nearest steady thing in a room that had stopped making sense to him. His grip shook. His eyes, for 1 second, actually found hers and stayed. 4 minutes, Reyna said, quiet enough that only he and the monitor could hear it. You get 4 minutes to be scared. Then we work. Something in his face changed. Not calm, nothing that clean. But a flicker of recognition underneath the fever. A man's body remembering something before his mind caught up to why. 4 minutes, he repeated, barely more than breath. You said, 4 minutes. That's right. Almost up. Reyna didn't let her voice change at all. Though something under her sternum had gone very still and very awake. A feeling she hadn't let herself have in 4 years. Stay with me. We're going to fix this. He went still under her hand. Not sedated still, not restrained still, just still. The way someone goes still once they've decided a voice is actually going to keep its word. Say, I need broad-spectrum antibiotics started before the gram stain even comes back. Aggressive fluids and a surgical consult for source control on that leg, Reyna said, already moving. That fragment needs to come out tonight, not on someone's convenient morning schedule. Agreed on all of it. Osei was already reaching for the phone. Page anesthesia too. Tell them it's not elective. You don't give orders on this floor, Grant said. I didn't. He just did. Reyna didn't slow down to enjoy it. The next 20 minutes moved the way the worst nights overseas used to move. Fast and mostly wordless between the people who knew what they were doing. Everyone else clearing the lane without needing to be told twice. Reyna ran the line, called the trends out loud without being asked. Adjusted the fluid rate twice without checking with anyone. And caught the exact moment his pressure started climbing back instead of sliding. Somewhere in the middle of it, the shaking in his hands slowed enough that the tech could finally get a clean IV in without a second attempt. And somebody exhaled like they'd been holding IT since the ambulance doors opened. Reyna didn't once look up to see who was watching. Frank was watching, arms still crossed, nodding slowly to himself. Like something he'd suspected for a long time had just been confirmed. Cray was watching too, and so was the film crew's advance producer. 3 days early for a walkthrough Reyna hadn't been warned about. Standing frozen in the hallway with a phone raised, forgotten in her hand, still recording. Cray opened her mouth once, like she meant to tell the woman to put it away, and then didn't. Whatever she was watching had already stopped being a liability in her head. And started being something else she hadn't found the word for yet. Grant stood a few feet back from the bed rail, close enough to help and not helping. Watching Reyna work with an expression that hadn't settled on anything. By the time the surgical team arrived to take him up, his pressure had steadied. His fever had started to break under the fluids. And the fragments of not quite language coming out of him had resolved, slowly, back into words that connected to each other. He didn't know her name yet. But something in the set of his shoulders had stopped fighting the room. And started, very faintly, trusting it. Dale Sutter came out of surgery a little after midnight. The fragment gone, the infection already losing ground to fluids and antibiotics. That had started an hour earlier than the textbook would have allowed if anyone else had been running the clock. By the time he was lucid enough to track a full sentence, his fever had broken. And the room around his bed had gone quiet. The particular quiet that settles once everyone stops being afraid of the same thing at once. "You're the one who told me 4 minutes," he said, voice wrecked but clear, when Reyna checked his line. "It wasn't a question. You were scaring the whole floor. Seemed like a fair deal." "No." He shook his head, slow, like it cost him something. "You said it before. A long time before. I've thought about that phrase probably 1,000 times since. And I never once thought I'd hear it again in a place like this." Reyna went very still. Ravine outside the wire. Truck flipped, half my unit screaming, and I was pinned under something I couldn't see, Dale said. To the room now, not just to her. Medic came down that slope like the fall didn't apply to her. Told me I had 4 minutes to be scared and then we were going to work. I made it 4 minutes. She made me work the 5th. Didn't even know her name until the debrief the next morning. Staff Sergeant Reyna Cross, on a casualty report I kept a copy of for 11 years. She pulled 2 of us out of that wreck with her bare hands. While command was still arguing about whether it was safe enough to send anyone down. Grant, standing at the foot of the bed with a chart she'd stopped reading 3 sentences ago, didn't move. Frank had drifted into the doorway somewhere in the last minute, arms uncrossed for once. Listening like a man who already half knew the ending. "That's not," Grant started. "It's exactly that," Dale said. "Ask her yourself. She won't tell you. She's never told anybody, far as I can tell. Which is its own kind of insult to what she did, if you want my honest opinion." The advance producer in the doorway had stopped filming her own footage and started filming this instead. Phone angled low and unobtrusive. Catching the charge nurse's face doing something complicated. Not quite disbelief, not quite shame. Something closer to a woman realizing the story she'd assigned to a nurse 4 years ago had never once been the real one. "You held a restraint order on a decorated combat medic tonight," Cray said quietly, arriving mid-scene. And doing arithmetic Reyna could see happening behind her eyes. The exact patient she'd tried to keep off this floor was standing at the center of it. And it was the best thing that had happened to this department all year. "I held a restraint order on a patient I believed was combative," Grant said. "That's a different sentence than the one you're implying." "Is it?" Reyna said. "You called him difficult before you called him sick. That's the sentence that mattered." Grant didn't answer that. The room didn't expect her to, and the silence did the work an answer wouldn't have. "I don't want this on camera," Reyna said, to Cray directly, flat and immediate. "Whatever footage exists of the last hour, this isn't the story you sold. This isn't a story about me. It's the only true one you've got," Cray said, and for once she didn't sound like she was managing anything. "I can cut around your face if that's what you need. I'm not cutting around what he just said." Theo, hovering near the doorway with a stack of unfiled charts he'd forgotten he was holding, watched her like he was rewriting 4 years of assumptions about the quietest nurse on the floor, all at once, in real time. The nursing student from earlier had drifted back too, close enough to hear. Close enough that she'd remember this exact hallway for the rest of her career whether she meant to or not. "For what it's worth," Dale said, quieter now, exhaustion finally winning, "I've spent 3 days being the guy from that video. Nobody once asked what actually happened to me. You're the first person all week who looked at the whole picture instead of just the part that made the news." "That's the job," Reyna said. "It was always the job. It just used to come with a different uniform attached to it." "Different uniform, same 4 minutes," Dale said, and managed something close to a laugh, weak and real. "You want to know the worst part? I've been telling that story to VA counselors for 2 years. Trying to get someone to take it seriously enough to actually look for the thing that was still in my leg. Told it to 3 different doctors. Not one of them thought to check. You did it in under an hour, off a hunch and a set of vitals nobody else read right. It wasn't a hunch. No, he said. I don't guess it was. The gram stain came back within the hour, confirming what she'd guessed at the bedside. An ordinary bacterial source from the old wound, fully treatable, fully explainable. Nothing about it that any psychiatric hold would ever have found or fixed. The full culture would take another day to speciate, but the antibiotics already running didn't need to wait on it. Grant read the preliminary report twice at the desk, alone, before she finally set it down and walked out without saying anything to anyone. Frank stopped by the desk on his way to end his own shift and handed Reyna the dog tags directly. Cleaned off, chain re-linked where it had worn thin. Figured you'd want to hang on to these for him, rather than let them ride down to records with the rest of his intake. Reyna stayed until Dale's vitals had held steady for a full hour. Then went to find a cup of coffee she wouldn't remember drinking. And didn't think about the camera in the doorway again until the shift was already over. Dale was moved to a regular floor 2 days later, wound healing. An appointment already booked with a case manager who specialized in veterans falling through the kind of gap he'd fallen through. Before he transferred up, Reyna stopped by his bed one last time. Off the clock, out of uniform in every way that mattered. You didn't have to come by, he said. I know. She set his dog tags on the blanket beside his hand, the ones Frank had passed to her the night before. Figured you'd want these back where they belong. He turned them over once, didn't say anything for a moment. You never told anybody. All these years working here, and not one person on this floor knew. Didn't seem like it was anybody's business but mine. It's not just yours anymore. Not after tonight. He said it without pushing, just stating it plainly, the way she'd once stated things to him in a ravine that didn't leave room for argument. For what it's worth, I'm glad it finally was. Ash Grove adopted a new protocol within the month. A flag in the chart for any patient with a service history presenting as agitated. Requiring a full medical workup before any chemical or physical restraint. No exceptions, no 15-minute countdowns. Reyna hadn't asked for her name on it. It ended up there anyway, in the fine print no one read except the people it was written to protect. The segment aired 3 weeks later, cut the way Cray had promised. Reyna's face in it for 11 seconds total, none of them close up, all of the words belonging to Dale. She's the reason I'm alive twice, he said, on camera, plain as anything. Once over there, once here. Most people don't get that lucky, The department got its funding. No one printed Reyna's full name in connection with any of it. Which was, as far as she was concerned, the whole point of the arrangement. Grant found her at the supply cart a few days after, her voice smaller than Reyna had heard it in 4 years. I called him difficult before I called him sick. You said that in front of half the floor, and I haven't stopped hearing it since. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I know. That's almost worse. Grant restocked a shelf that didn't need restocking. I've spent 4 years thinking you didn't feel anything. I think I just never once bothered to ask what you were carrying instead. You could have asked. I could have. Grant didn't offer an excuse, and Reyna didn't ask for one. It wasn't quite an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. And Reyna let it sit there unfinished, same as most true things on this floor. Frank found her on her way out that night. Theo trailing a step behind, still faintly sheepish about something he hadn't quite apologized for yet. I was rough with Dale before the labs came back, Theo admitted. Treated him like the video instead of like a person. I could have asked instead of assumed. Kind of the whole lesson, isn't it? You didn't know yet. For what it's worth, whatever you used to be, you're a hell of a nurse now too. Frank said as much before any of us knew why he was right. Frank held the door for her, same as every night. Told my wife about you years ago, he said, without preamble. Said there's a nurse on nights who scans every room like she's checking for something the rest of us can't see. Figurative you'd earned that habit somewhere. Didn't figure I'd live to hear the whole story, but I'm glad I did. He tipped his head toward the parking lot. 4 minutes, was it? Reyna almost smiled. Something like that. Her hand found the chain at her collar without her quite deciding to, same as it always did. And for the first time in longer than she could count, she let it stay where anyone could see it. She drove home under a sky finally clear of snow, hands steady on the wheel. As steady as they'd been for 4 years and long before that too, in places far louder than this one. Dale's case manager appointment was in 11 days. She'd already decided, without telling anyone, that she'd be the one to drive him there if he wanted the company. She didn't need the department to know her name. She only needed to know, herself, that the job had never actually changed. Just the uniform, just the room, just the particular kind of quiet she got to keep afterward. We're quick to sort people into difficult and deserving, especially when the difficult ones are already carrying more than we can see. A man who shouts in a waiting room gets a label before he gets a diagnosis. A quiet nurse who doesn't perform her feelings gets mistaken for someone who doesn't have any. Neither of them got asked the one question that would have actually explained them. Both mistakes come from the same place. We read the surface because the surface is faster than asking, and faster almost always wins. It costs us people who needed one more question before we decided what kind of person they were. And it costs them the chance to be understood by anyone who didn't already have a reason to look closer. This isn't only a hospital problem. It's the coworker everyone's decided is difficult, the relative everyone stopped inviting. The stranger whose worst 5 minutes became the only 5 minutes anyone remembers about them. If this one got to you, that's Hidden Stretch. Subscribe if you're new here, and tell me in the comments, who in your life got labeled difficult before anyone bothered to ask why?